Yo, what's good? Check this out. Not a green screen. Okay, so I'm a big fan of Goblin. He's a YouTuber, and recently I was watching the Gobcast, and he had Leafly on, and started watching a bunch of her videos, and you know, it got me thinking I should probably just start telling some of my stories, because while I'm not anything like Goblin and Leafly, like I don't have this childhood of being a total degenerate drug addict, you know, I do have some crazy stories that should be shared. So while I say I wasn't a degenerate drug addict, you know, I have done drugs. So the first story I wanted to put out there was my first time doing LSD, my first acid trip. And everybody I've ever told this story, they think it's pretty crazy, because it really is. And I've had a lot of pretty wild stories in my life. So just a little like preview. My first acid trip was up on a mountain during a solar eclipse, okay? Up on a big mountain during a solar eclipse. So, you know, to get there, I gotta take it back to my childhood. So back when I was a little kid, really little, like 4, I was just always super fascinated with the stars and the planets and astronomy. Like, I remember learning the order of the planets: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and back then Pluto. Before I knew my ABCs or my numbers, and like my mom would have me show off to her friends, like, look at my son, he knows his planets before anything, back when I was like 4. So I just always loved space, okay? And you know, in my middle school years, I was homeschooled, okay? So obviously I was a bit of a nerd, and part of my homeschool curriculum in 8th grade, I got to choose a science curriculum, right? Maybe you heard of the Great Courses. They're still around today. They're on a streaming platform. Like, can't remember what it's called, but back in the day, there used to be the Great Courses, and they were these DVD and VHS box sets that had just professors lecture about their subject matter, okay? So in 8th grade, I got astronomy by the Great Courses, and Alex Filippenko was the professor. He's this really cool guy out of Berkeley. You've probably seen him if you've ever watched like the Discovery Channel or National Geographic. He's the guy with kind of curly hair who's just like always smiling and like super enthusiastic about astronomy. And so this was a long lecture series. It was like 90 lectures, and it was so enjoyable. It gave me this great in-depth like view of astronomy. It was it wasn't that in-depth, but for 8th grade, like, I learned so much about all sorts of stuff with astronomy. So basically, Alex Filippenko, this professor, was super enthusiastic about solar eclipses, okay? And back then, that was like the year 2010 or so. Yeah, 2010, I was in 8th grade. And, you know, it's really not that often that there's a total solar eclipse anywhere near where you live. Now, for those who don't know, a total solar eclipse is when you got the sun, the earth is here, I'm the earth, I'm just like looking out, and then the moon comes across and blocks the sun during the day. And this is pretty rare. This doesn't happen very much, and you have to be in a very specific spot on earth for it to completely cover, for the moon to completely cover the sun, right? So Alex Filippenko, this professor on my lecture series, is like, in 2017, on August 21st, there's going to be a solar eclipse that crosses across America. And it's super unique, super rare. So make sure that you're in the spot along the line to see that eclipse in 2017, right? And in 2010, you know, when I was in 8th grade, that seemed like the distant future, right? But it always stuck in me, like, man, 2017, I got to be somewhere to see that eclipse, okay? So that's the spark of the inspiration of how I got to the spot for my first acid trip, okay? Now, I graduated high school in 2015, and I worked my first year out of high school, so basically by 2017, I was starting to get nervous because I remember this eclipse was coming up. Now, I grew up in Washington State, okay? And this eclipse, it first touched the coast of America right above, it was on Salem, Oregon, if I remember correctly. And then it went all the way across America, and and then left America. I think it was around like North Carolina, South Carolina region. So it was like, it's called the Great American Eclipse, and almost anybody in America could travel to see it, right? So basically, I was like, I'm getting to this eclipse, and the closest basically it was coming to me was in the Rocky Mountains in Idaho, okay? And I'd never actually been to the Rocky Mountains, and so I planned this trip. I was like, I'm gonna go to the Rocky Mountains, up on top of one of these mountains, big old tall mountains, and experience the eclipse, okay? That was the plan. Now, I had a couple buddies who I wanted to bring along. Now, these friends were like, almost like family. So my mom and their mom were best friends ever since they were like 19 years old. And so we were babies together. We always visited every summer. These guys lived in Alaska, so they would come down and visit in Washington, and we would see them pretty much every summer our whole life. So I like grew up with these two brothers, okay? You know, they have super unique names. So I'm gonna call the older brother Eric, okay? And the brother who's about my age, he was just a little bit younger than me. Let's see. I'm gonna call him Dusty, okay? Dusty and Eric, okay? So Dusty is like right around my age, and Eric's a couple years older, right? So I tell my friend Dusty, yo, I'm going to this eclipse. It'd be super cool if you could come along. So he tells his brother Eric, and then he also brings his good friend, okay? These guys come from Alaska, so they've done all this commercial fishing. So they bring their friend who is from Laos, not like, he's from Alaska, but his ancestors, you know, his parents or whatever from Laos. Call him, let's see, how about Jax? Yeah, that's a perfect name for him. So basically, during the summer, right, this was August, they drive up from where they live in Washington up to where I'm at, which is like rural northern Washington state. And you know, we hang out. I was living with my mom at the time at the family house, the family farmhouse. And so we spent a couple days like getting prepared, getting all our stuff, writing the lists out, because it was going to be a pretty far drive. I'd never actually gone on a road trip that far away. And so Dusty brought his car, and we got to use it, which was pretty sweet. You know, basically just like a normal suburban kind of car. Not a suburban, just like a normal town car. So not exactly what you want to go to the mountains with, but thankfully, you know, we got highways most of the way. So yeah, basically we spent a couple days getting ready, and then we set out, and it took a couple days to get there. And you gotta mind, during the summer in Washington and around the west of America, there's like big forest fires everywhere. So we traveled east towards Missoula, and there was just like these forest fires we had to keep avoiding. So we just keep driving, you know. We get to Missoula the first night. It's getting dark, and our plan was to camp, you know. Camp for our rest, you know. Find a campground, sleep there. Thing is though, Missoula's like surrounded by these wildfires. So we leave Missoula, we travel past Missoula south, and we come to this campground, and the gate is kind of like half closed, right? It looked like it was supposed to be closed, but we were like tired as shit, and we're like, fuck it. We're gonna open the gate, we're going to the campground. It wasn't locked, it was just kind of like closed, but not locked. So we go in there, dude, we set up our little camp. We had some tents, you know, we were going backpacking, so we had all our stuff. Dude, I just remember like smoking some weed, smoking a bowl, pretty much going to sleep. Okay, and then like, I wake up to what sounds like literally tanks rolling into this campground, okay? Middle of the night, probably like 2, 3 in the morning. There's all these lights. It's like, there's like tanks. You feel like literally tanks are rolling in. So we all wake up, we're like, what the fuck is going on, right? So, you know, we didn't actually go see what it was, because they pretty much just like didn't bother us. And we could see after looking a little bit that they were giant fire trucks, right? Basically, the whole fire brigade, all these wildland firefighters were using the campground as a staging ground. So we wake up super early, and the fire marshal's like at our campsite, like, what are you doing here? We're like, well, the gate was open, you know? So he's like, you better get out of here before the sheriff gets here, you know? So we pack up real fast in the morning, and we keep going. And everything was fine. He was nice. He wasn't too mean or anything. We didn't, like, hurt them at all. There was plenty of room for everybody, but that was, you know, that was the first night. And so the rest of the day, we just keep driving. And we're driving south at this point through the Rocky Mountains, and we come into this valley. It's this giant wide valley with the Rocky Mountains, boom, boom, on both sides. And, you know, at the time, like, we were listening to these audiobooks in the car. I remember specifically, yeah, the older brother, Eric, he was like one of these, you know, what do you call it? Like, back then, there was like this movement of dudes who would, you know, like, pick up on girls, and it was like, get buffed, do push-ups, like, go out with your game. He was like into that shit. So we were listening to these audiobooks about that kind of shit, and I always thought it was super funny. So every time we go to the store or whatever, all these guys would be like trying to hit on girls and shit. To me, I just never was, I always thought that was so cringy. Like, hella cringy. I could never do that, you know. Call it lame or whatever. It just cringed me out so bad. Like, honestly, it's like, dude, how thirsty are you? So that was like kind of awkward, honestly. I kind of hated it, to be honest. And then, you know, they were so thirsty. Like, they're just talking about all these girls. Like, oh man, kind of rough. Kind of rough. It was super cringy to me. You know, I'm cringy as hell too, but that's just what I remember on this car ride. We're listening to these audiobooks about like game and shit. So I'm pretty sure the second day we basically arrived, because I don't remember camping a second day. And I had planned this whole thing out, so I knew exactly where we had to be. And mind you, this line where the eclipse comes and blocks the sun out is really thin. It's only like 40 miles. So if we don't make it to this line, we're not going to see the total eclipse, right? And so I remember the place I was trying to go was the 4th of July trailhead. It was in the Sawtooth Mountains in Idaho. Okay, so we find it, we get to the trailhead, but there's like a flood. So the actual trailhead we can't get to, and there's like, dude, I want to say 50 cars. There's a lot of people going to this line to see this eclipse, right? So I remember talking to this ranger who was like this pretty young girl, so they were like hitting on this ranger girl. And she was telling us like, oh yeah, you can't get to the 4th of July trailhead because it's flooded. So we're like, we have to improvise, right? And I had studied the map a bunch, so I was like, okay guys, like, I'm pretty sure we can just hike in this direction and go to an alternative trailhead. So that's what we did. Now mind you, this was my like not my first backpacking trip, but like my second, okay? I went backpacking when I was a kid one time, when I was like 12. And then now I'm like 19, so this is like my real first backpacking trip, and I just had the worst backpack. It is horrible. It just hurts. It's too small. It's just like awkward. I didn't pack it right. I didn't know what I was doing packing it. So like, honestly, a miserable hike for me. I was really pretty slow. I was always in the back, you know. I wasn't ever like, when I was a kid, I wasn't the strongest. Like physically, I've gotten way stronger. I've done a lot of hiking since then, but this is, you know, so I was kind of slow, and it was not too far of a hike, but terrible terrain, let me tell you. If you ever hiked out in the Rockies or Cascades, in kind of you know this terrain. It's where basically they logged at one point, and then they let the trees grow, and they don't thin it at all. So there's just like tons and tons and tons of little trees. But then after they let it all grow, then this giant wildfire comes through, burns all the little trees, and then a couple years go by and they all fall down. So it's just burnt, dead, fallen trees everywhere, right? That's the terrain. And you know, the trail isn't too bad. It's actually cleared. Some of these trails, though, they're like very hard to pass through because of this. All these trees that fall. It's pathetic, dude. Don't even get me started about the forest management out there. Insane. So anyway, you know, it's only a one-day hike to where we're trying to get to, and we hike. I don't know. We get tired at one point, and I don't know. We probably should have kept going. There was a lake up ahead, but we decided to just basically camp in the middle. All these down trees and shit. It was like probably the worst, visually, the worst campsite I've ever gone to in any of my hikes. But hey, it's the first one, and I don't know. We were there for the Eclipse, right? So, you know, a little more backstory on these friends, right? So, I've always been pretty straight edge. I was homeschooled. I was raised, you know, like Christian and in the church and all that stuff. So, I didn't smoke weed until I was 18 for the first time. You know, I drank a little bit before that, but basically my friend Dusty and these guys, these brothers, dude, they have been doing drugs since they were like 13. If you know Goblin, the guy who inspired me to do this video, like, they're like him, right? They're like fucking in the D-Gen class at school, like, you know, smoking weed all the time, doing acid, doing psychedelics from a young age, right? So basically, I got my drug information from them, okay? The first time I did mushrooms, which was before this, you know, I got it from Dusty. We had synthesized DMT. Like, I have more stories about these guys, honestly. But this time, I was like, LSD is a drug I would like to do. I've always limited myself to psychedelics and kind of drugs that you might say grow your consciousness or whatever, at least theoretically. So mushrooms, LSD, DMT, marijuana, those are the drugs I was open to. And I had done a lot of research on all my drugs, okay? I never did any drug willy-nilly. It was always after like tons and tons of research, and I pretty much knew what I wanted to do, and there's no amount of peer pressure you can put on me to do a drug. Like, I know what I want to do, and you cannot convince me to try a drug that I'm not already knowledgeable about. So part of this was like, dude, I'm gonna do LSD during this solar eclipse. That's gonna be my first experience in LSD. And I don't know what could be a more badass first trip, honestly. I had never seen a solar eclipse before, and I'd never done LSD. I had done mushrooms several times though, so I had dipped my foot in the psychedelic waters, okay? And so leading up to this eclipse, let's remind ourselves, this is August 21st, 2017. So I've been reading one chapter in Revelations per day, because there's 21 chapters in Revelation. So I literally brought my King James Bible with me so I could read chapter 21 on the 21st. We got there the 20th, so we, you know, made a fire, we cooked, we smoked weed, you know. I smoked cigarettes at the time too. Like, I'm talking about how I only do drugs that are mind uplifting, but yeah, I smoked cigarettes, of course. Not anymore, but that's a whole nother story, how I quit cigarettes. So the eclipse is in the morning of the 21st, like 10:15 a.m. if I remember right, around there. It was before 11, I'm pretty sure. So we got to get up early, and the plan is we're gonna climb up the mountains. So you got to imagine there's like mountains all along the sides, and we're in the valley. So our plan is to climb up this mountain. We're gonna take the LSD before we start hiking, okay? And we got to get up early, like at dawn, basically. So that's what we did. We wake up at dawn. We drop these tabs. So I did half a tab of LSD for my first time on LSD, okay? Eric took like 2, I remember, and the other guys took 1, I'm pretty sure. Like, Eric was the older one. He's more of a drug addict, I guess you could say. So we take our tabs. I don't remember eating breakfast or anything. I just remember reading chapter 21 of Revelations, and start walking, right? Start walking. And it is horrible terrain, let me remind you. It's all these trees falling. It's just the most miserable terrain you've ever seen. So we start hiking, trudging. start feeling the LSD for sure. I remember it vividly. The first effect I remember looking at a tree, and there's that familiar like waving. The tree's kind of like, oh, hello, hello there. And dude, Eric, not having a good time. He's like getting kind of sick, right? Some people get nauseous on psychedelics. I have never felt, well, a little bit, but I've never like actually been sick from psychedelics, even mushrooms. So Eric is like getting kind of sick. He's in the back. We're like, shit, going a little slow, trying to not leave him behind. And I remember we get to this little like plateau, right? There's all on mountains. If you ever been to mountains, there's always, you're hiking up and you think it's the top. Oh, it's just a plateau, and then there's the next part of the mountain. And so we wait there for him, and he starts just throwing up, right? He yaks it out, makes him feel way better. And so then, you know, instead of just climbing, well, actually, I remember now. We actually kept going up, yeah, and we got to the top of the ridge, right? And this ridge continues on an incline, and it goes up, you know, it's this ridge, it goes up, and there's a big mountain over here, right? So we start following the ridge, and, you know, at this point, I'm definitely starting to feel the acid pretty strong. I wasn't, like, overwhelmed or anything, but I could tell I was altered, right? Now, for me, like, literally right now, I'm not wearing shoes. I don't wear shoes as a philosophy when I can help it, okay? So, I'm like, dude, I'm taking my shoes off, and especially when I'm on psychedelics, I just hate wearing shoes, okay? So I take my shoes off, and these guys do as well, because they're all feeling the acid, and I guess, I don't know if they copied me, or they just were inspired by me, you know? They decided to take their shoes off as well. And we keep hiking without our shoes up this ridge, okay? And now we're getting pretty close to T=0 on this Eclipse, right? And I brought these badass binoculars that I bought just for this. So, now don't look at the sun with binoculars, guys. Don't do that. But I had the binoculars with me. They had a camera, and, you know, we're way up in the altitude, right? Elevation. We're at like 9,000 feet. The tallest mountains there are like 10,000. So we're just below the tallest mountain. And as soon as this eclipse starts, so you got to imagine the sun's here, the moon starts coming across, and at first you just this little sliver, and if you just kind of glance at it, you can see the moon starting to cover the sun. And as it progresses, it's starting to just get like noticeably cold. The air is so thin up there that just a little bit less sunlight is noticeable. And by the time it's half covered, we're like, oh my god, it's freezing. Like, we were cold, so we had to keep hiking. And when it was probably 3/4 of the way full, I'm like, okay, we got to stop because this is going to progress fast. It was actually more than 3/4. When it was like, okay, we got to stop and set up and get ready to witness this thing because it only lasts like 3 minutes, and it would be a shame to miss the 3 minutes, okay? Now, get my binoculars out, they get the camera out, and I had brought literally some of the best weed I ever have had. Now, I don't smoke weed anymore, at least I haven't for the last 3 months, so, you know, I've been slowly, like, getting away from weed, but I still love weed, okay, and I have fond memories of it, okay, and I remember, okay, it was like a blueberry flavored weed. I want to say it was Blue Dream, but it wasn't, because it was blueberry flavored, some kind of blueberry thing, some kind of blueberry string, and I had like I want to say it was a perfectly clean pipe that I waited for to have this little hit of weed right as the eclipse totality began, okay? And I can remember that hit of weed was like the fuel in the rocket of the LSD trip, right? If you've ever smoked while tripping, you know what I'm talking about. It, you know, sends you to this, like, new level. It's like the rocket ship, right? So, right as I'm like, dude, we have, like, maybe 2 minutes, I take this hit of weed, and it tasted so good. Literally, I would say the best tasting hit of weed I've ever had, I gotta say. Thinking back to all the hits of weed, this one I remember, man. Most of them I do not remember if there's anything special about them, but this one was fire. Tasted so good, sent me on this rocket, just like boom. okay? Now, Eric is like, dude, we gotta keep going. We gotta keep hiking. I'm like, no, dude, we gotta stay here. This is the spot. Like, it was a nice little flat spot, but there was higher mountains for sure, but I'm like, we don't have time. We have to be ready because this shit doesn't last long, right? Okay, so literally we're at the moment of totality. It happens fast. The sun is covered, and the sun becomes a black orb. And now usually the sun is so bright, it blocks out the atmosphere of the sun. And the atmosphere of the sun is massive. It's this giant, like plasma field that's being bent and warped by giant magnetic fields. I want to say it's the penumbra, I think it's called. I'm losing the name of it right now, but the atmosphere of the sun is incredibly cool looking, and you can only see it during these solar eclipses reliably, in the sky. So I'm like looking through the binoculars, and I give them the binoculars, and it is insane, dude. So literally, as it's covering, the coyotes, maybe wolves, some kind of canids, dogs, coyotes, they all start howling because they think it's night. And let me just describe also, there's so much that happens in this moment. So the entire horizon becomes like a sunset everywhere around, a 360 sunset, okay? And right as it's covering, you can see the shadow sweeping towards you across the mountains, okay? It's like sweeping towards you. I guess it's sweeping 1,000 miles per hour, right? Because that's the speed the Earth's rotating. And you can literally see it. And as this happens, as it sweeps, all these coyotes go, woo! Also, we got all these jet airplanes following the shadow. So right as the shadow passes, we got all these jets flying straight over us because they're just heading along with the shadow, making observations and stuff. Okay? So this moment is insane. It's totally insane. Now, there's this phenomena with solar eclipses. You got to think. The moon has all these mountains and craters and valleys. So right as the moon's about to cross the sun, right as it's just covering completely, you have the last rays of sunlight blasting through the valleys of the mountains on the moon. So the moon looks like a diamond ring. It's called the Bailey's beads phenomena. Okay? The Bailey's beads phenomena. So it's insane looking, and I really was a huge fan of this phenomena. I'll throw it back a little bit more of a little side tangent. So back when I was in high school, I'm a big nerd, right? So I was part of this club, team, sport called Knowledge Bowl. It's basically a quiz game where you compete with other schools, and you get asked this crazy obscure question. You have 15 seconds to confer with your team and then answer. And my team and I were super good. We got to state every year. We got up to 4th place. We never won state, but one of the questions that I was always the proudest of getting was I remember it was the last question of a round, and it was something about this Bailey's beads phenomena. It was like, oh, what's the phenomena called when during a solar eclipse the sun shines through the mountains? And I was like, bam, Bailey's beads. But it took me a second though, because I thought back to that Alex Filippenko lecture course that I had listened to in 8th grade. And I was like, I know this. I was like, oh my god, it's Bailey's beads. I learned this from Alex Filippenko. And so I had always had this dream of seeing Bailey's beads, and this is when I first saw Bailey's beads. Through the binoculars, it's so insane. And if you're not inspired to go see a solar eclipse by now, dude, just keep listening, okay? So throughout history, solar eclipses have been revered as like omens, right? And you just hear that, and you're like, well, these little tribal dudes, like, they don't know what's up, like, whatever, it's just a solar eclipse. But let me tell you, when you're there and you experience it, it's like the most powerful cosmic event, the most powerful omen you can ever imagine. Literally so powerful. Like, we were I remember my friend Dusty, he's like, we're just like forced to the ground to our knees, like Elijah shit. Like we're like in reverence to the universe because it's so powerful. The sun is taken away from you. And he's like, oh, I love you guys. We're like, I love you. You know, we're just like in this revere moment, like real church, man. And it's so fast and it's so powerful. So, you know, I made sure everybody got to look through the binoculars, and these were such great binoculars, dude. I don't know where those went. I wish I still had those things. And it doesn't last long, 3 minutes, and then pretty soon, man, I remember this specifically. I was like, because I had missed the Bailey's beads when it was coming the first time. So I made sure I had the binoculars and witnessed Bailey's beads as the sun uncovered, right? So it's over so fast, and it's so cold, and the coyotes are howling. The shadow goes away. The sun, you know, the whole horizon is a sunset. I guess it'd be a sunrise for a moment again, you know. But then it's over, and then the sun starts coming back. And as the sun's coming back, we're kind of, you know, calming down a little bit. Of course, we're still on acid, and the temperature starts going up again, and that's really feeling good. I remember being specifically quite cold for this whole experience. But, you know, 15 minutes later, 20 minutes later, most of the sun is back, and mind you, our shoes are like way down the mountain. We don't have any shoes, and, you know, we just sat there and kind of like chilled for a while. I remember the other guys were going around looking for crystals and rocks. There was crystals all over the ground here. It was totally covered in crystals, quartz crystals. And I just went up on a rock, being the introvert that I am, and kind of just sat there and meditated. And actually, this is the moment I had my first encounter with one of my like spirit animals. Okay? So I sat there for probably 20 minutes, just totally silent. And I started noticing this little like cheep, cheep, cheep kind of sound, and I just like did not know where it was coming from, but it was very nearby. It was very nearby. And eventually I look like through the rocks, like through the shadows, in this little hole, just like, and there's a pair of eyes, right? And so it turns out this creature is the pika or the pika. I usually say pika, spelled P-I-K-A. It's a relative of the rabbit that only lives in these high elevation rocks. Okay, so I got to interact with this little creature and just look at it, and I didn't tell anybody about it because I knew these guys are hunters. They're from Alaska. They'd be like, fuck yeah, dinner time. Maybe that's the kind of shit they do. Like, to be honest. And I knew that I was only able to see this creature, the pika, because I was so still and you know, at peace, right? Because it took so long for it to reveal itself. It was hiding there for so long. And since then, I've interacted with them many times up in the high altitudes. They're always above 6,000 feet, 7,000. Above 6,000. I've never seen them below 6,000 feet. And so that was really cool. That was really special. So at this point, the sun is back out, and up at this high elevation, man, there's like no atmosphere. And so the air is cold. It's not holding the heat, but the UV from the sun is like, it's like insanely intense. I can feel myself burning, right? I already could feel myself burning. So pretty soon these rocks are starting to get really hot, okay? And we don't have any shoes. So we're like, okay, probably time to go down now. It's probably 12, it was probably like 11:30, maybe or later. But it's time to start heading down the mountain. And so many things in my life were all set in place right here. So I'm just like slowly going down the mountain without my shoes, and on this LSD trip I'm having this realization, like, when I walk barefooted, I need to make sure every step is comfortable. Now, contrast that with my friends. They're like running down the mountain like, oh my god, it hurts. You know, like just brutalizing their feet, right? You know, going from like little shady spot to little shady spot, just careening down this mountain, like fucking their feet, right? And I'm just like slowly, step by step, you know, choosing strategically the right steps so that I don't hurt my feet too bad. And that shaped my philosophy for the next 10 years, like strongly. I realized, oh, this applies to all of life, right? I shouldn't rush to my destination. I should make sure every step is as comfortable as possible. And that's the barefoot philosophy. And man, I'm totally barefoot right now. I'm out here in the middle of the jungle at this river in Mexico. Well, I didn't bring any shoes because, anyway, I could go on about barefoot life. Okay, never mind. So, so we were like careening down this mountain, and I remember they were like so blown away by my whole approach to the problem of no shoes. Or like, it was like this big moral lesson. It was really funny. It was really funny too. So eventually we get back to our shoes. Mind you, honestly, back then I had the worst hiking shoes. So I already had blisters from the day before. So we eventually get back to our shoes, and I put my shoes back on, but honestly, I didn't even like wearing them. But I kept them on anyway, and man, we made it back to our camp. I remember we got separated though. I do remember coming down that mountain. We got all separated. Dude, I'm pretty sure, yeah, we got separated, but eventually we got back all in one spot. And we camped right by this creek. So man, I just had such a blissful rest of the day. I had like, I want to say a quarter pack of my American Spirit light, my blue American Spirit cigarettes left. I just sat in this creek with my feet in the creek, just like smoking these cigarettes. And I remember consciously thinking like, dude, I'm gonna run out of cigarettes up here, but I don't give a shit. I'm just gonna smoke all these cigarettes because I'm not gonna feel this good for a while. Like, this is gonna be one of the best, you know, times of my life, basically. So, you know, I don't smoke cigarettes anymore, but man, I thoroughly enjoyed the cigarettes when I smoked them. I really did, you know, and I stopped smoking them when it wasn't enjoyable anymore. That's the truth. And now I'm starting to kind of think about cigarettes again, but nope, they're not enjoyable anymore. Anyway, it's been 5 years of no cigarettes for me, so I can't go back. I can't go back. And so that's the story of my first time on LSD, which was on a mountain at 9,000 feet during a solar eclipse, which I think is, I'm not, like, pretty much the coolest first LSD trip I've ever heard about. I didn't do a whole lot. The LSD arguably wasn't the main feature, but damn, it did absolutely enhance it. And what it did for me was make me fall in love with solar eclipses, and I will keep chasing them the rest of my life. I saw the last one in 2024 at the beaches of Mazatlan, and I'm going in Mexico, and I'm going to be preparing and prepared for 2040, the next one over in Montana. We got some years before that one though, here in North America. So I hope you enjoyed that story. I got tons of crazy stories. They're not like these, like, I've had a lot of experience in the mountains with psychedelics. You know, I'm a big nerd. I'm like a different type of degenerate. So yeah, so I've been listening to Goblin for so many years and realized, like, dude, I should share some of my stories too, because why the fuck not? So fucking thank you for listening if you listen to this whole story, and I'm sure I'll get way better at telling stories, but you know, I love to talk. It's like my passion. I love to talk, so talking to cameras, I'd love it. Okay, so let's give you a little panorama out here in Mexico and Jalisco. And thanks for watching. Peace.